Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Looks like Virginia. Looks like it's being called. It's being called that baby Trump going to be the next governor. And it comes down to a couple of issues, really. I mean, you got to give credit. You really got to give credit to the Republican messengers. It's about masks. It's about vaccine mandates. It's about critical race theory. And you go, huh? It's about getting all these people to show up to the school board meetings. And this is what the Republicans do masterfully. They're good at it. They do it all the time. They pick up these issues. They make them real short, easy to remember, easy to regurgitate, things to be afraid of. Critical race theory. Kind of reminds me of radical Islamic terrorism. They got a lot of mileage out of that one. A lot of mileage. And the critical race theory thing is damn it. Seconds before I go on air, I get the hiccups. And that, my friends, is the fun of live radio. Yeah. Are you okay over there? I'm glad you're enjoying my pain. So happy for that. And look, we need to laugh. And I need this. Maybe this is the distraction we need in this moment. Because, critical race theory, not even a thing. Nobody's teaching it. Now, I know, there's somebody out there doing it. It's not a thing. None of the teachers that I talk to, they don't even know what it is themselves. And it's not part of the curriculum. But it's the boogeyman. It's the thing that is going to get the poorly educated, the crowd that Trump loves so much. It's going to get them all riled up, all bunched up in the panties, ready to storm the school board meetings. And come out in record numbers. Look, I mean, and the numbers don't lie. This was part of the problem. And the message that's going to come out of this is not that, no, it's not the critical race theory. It's not that at all. It's that the Democrats went too far. Democrats went too far. They're socialism. Granny getting chompers. Too far. And I would argue the opposite is true. I would argue that the Joe Manchins of the world, that weren't allowing us to get things done, they're responsible for this. You got to go bold. And this is what Republicans understand. They understand that in order to lead, you got to have the message. In order to move forward, You gotta rile the base. You gotta give them something to run on, even if it's not even in their interest. And that's the scary part. I'm going to take a quick break. Pick up on the other side of the hiccups. Right back after this. Stick around.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. That was the day members of the industrial workers of the world began a free speech fight in Spokane, Washington. Wobblies often intersected seasonal workers through street corner soapboxing. Many towns and cities worked to resist IWW organizing efforts by passing ordinances against such rallies. Wobblies challenged these repressive tactics. They would descend on a town or city in great numbers, forcing mass arrests that overwhelmed local authorities and judicial systems. At Spokane, the organizing campaign began a year earlier. Wobblies mobilized against local employment agencies that charged workers fees for jobs that didn't exist. The campaign was so popular that the IWW was able to establish a union hall, hold meetings and lectures, and establish a newspaper. The Spokane City Council quickly passed an ordinance against street corner rallies. When Wobblies learned that religious groups were exempt from the restrictive ordinance, they announced November 2nd as Free Speech Day in Spokane. They put out the call, wanted men to fill the jails of Spokane. By the end of the month, as many as 500 had been arrested. The War Department even offered up nearby Fort Wright to handle the glut of prisoners. A young Elizabeth Gurley Flynn arrived in Spokane to soapbox. Efforts to arrest her were briefly frustrated after she chained herself to a nearby lamppost. Flynn made good use of her time in jail. She reported on appalling prison conditions and accused the local sheriff of operating a brothel out of the women's prison section. The free speech fight gained nationwide attention and enjoyed wide public support. By March, all prisoners were released, the ordinance had been rescinded, and employment agencies' license revoked. The IWW won big.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, the liberal New York Times. And again, this is one of those things that you go, the liberal New York Times, they're the ones pushing this narrative that, everything's... I love how Republicans do this. It's the liberal New York Times. Here's what they had to write today in one of their columns. In the final hours of campaigning on Monday, to become Virginia's next governor, it was Glenn Youngkin offering an optimistic vision for the future while Terry McAuliffe delivered harsh warnings about ghosts of the past. We will not teach our children to view everything through the lens of race, Mr. Youngkin told supporters at a midday rally in an airplane hangar. So on day one, I will ban critical race theory from Virginia's school. Now, they do a bit of, half, critical race theory is a graduate-level academic framework that argues that historical patterns of racism are ingrained in law and other modern institutions. It's not taught in Virginia public schools, but conservatives have turned it into a flashpoint in key suburban areas such as Loudoun County, just outside of Washington. Now, understand, we're not going to go to that. And the framing of this is, Youngkin has an optimistic view. An optimistic view of what? Of what? Seriously, what's the optimistic view? What's he bringing back? What's he doing? Race hatred. I'm going to take you back to the good old days when we could say that word that no one's allowed to say anymore. That we got separate fountains for people. That's the optimism. Oh, geez, And this is where, again, I come back to Manchin and cinema. You had a chance to get some things done, and you didn't. Had nothing to run on, and this is going to carry into 2022. The Republicans do a much better job of riling up the base, riling up their people to chant simple-minded slogans and to believe things that aren't true. Because they've got a larger megaphone. They've got a messaging vehicle second to none. Look, their messaging is better. Democrats do a crummy job of messaging. Always have. Because they're smarter. I mean, you go through the exit polling, and the exit polling tells a lot of tales. College-educated people tend to overwhelmingly vote for Democrats because they get the big picture stuff. Those with less than a high school diploma overwhelmingly vote for Republicans. How that's possible, no idea. But that's what it is. That's where we're seeing things. And again, the race division. White women, voted in the majority for Youngkin. Usually white women are smarter than that. A little bit. White men are lost. It's, we want to bring back the Confederate flag, evidently. And sadly, that's what our things have come down to. These simple-minded. It's not about policy anymore, because you can't give me Youngkin's policy on what things, other than he's going to ban critical race theory. That's all I care about. And you go, but no one's doing it. You're banning something that does not exist. And that's what you're going to hand the keys to the kingdom over for a guy who is, a baby Trump wannabe. And we fall for it. It's the same thing, the bathroom issue, the who's marrying who. I don't care. You know what I know? I know not a single Republican voted to get children early preschool, pre-K funding. Not one. I know none of the Republicans in the U.S. Senate voted to negotiate for prescription drug prices. Not one of them voted to make sure that Granny can get hearing and dental and eye as part of Medicare. Not one. I know that overwhelmingly, not one of them voted to include free community college. Go down the list of all the things that they're not doing, but they're banning critical race theory. What are they doing to make people's lives better? Is this making people's lives better? No, it's falling for jingoism. It's falling for sloganeering. And look, you see it in events now. You always got some nitwit screaming something about Brandon. Like, so, it's a dog whistle. Oh, we know something you don't know. You're just showing your 60 IQ. And this is the frustrating part of our political system. That person with a 60 IQ who's going, no, Brandon, I'm voting for that guy. He gets the same vote as someone who actually knows what the issues are and why we need them. And this is what, Trump understood. And this is what the Republican Party, Trump's Republican Party, completely understands. Issues do not matter to a large segment of voters. It's what slogans you can throw out, what diversions. And it's frustrating in that you're going to see Virginia go backwards. Any progress that they've made over the last couple years, this guy's going to undo. People's lives are going to get worse. And I often go, what does it take? I used to have a kind of a libertarian view of things, that maybe things have to get so bad that only then will we wake up. And I kind of still have that, because I think we're the only way we straighten out as a country, the only way we come to some bit of middle of the road is another depression, is another just horrific period of horrible. Much like the Great Depression, and you saw a generation come together, not because they were predisposed to being united or some kind of high-minded democratic theory. No, because they needed to. It was the moment. It was the time. And you would have thought the pandemic could have been that time, but no. The moneyed interests, who we give a lot to, saw another way to divide and conquer. Another way to pay one half of the working class to murder the other half. And to make things impossible to get done. Because right now, as long as nothing gets done, no legislation passes through in Washington, none of the things get addressed, the billionaire class still controls everything. The pendulum has swung that far that they don't want things to get done. They certainly don't want to pay any more taxes because they're reaping wild benefits. And at the end of the day, it's all about the money. While people are fighting over critical race theory, which, I've yet to find someone give me a cogent answer of what critical race theory means to them. They're being robbed blind. And this is the part that's just infuriating to me. That they are being robbed blind. And don't know or don't even care. Because, well, you're not going to make me wear a stinking mask. You're not going to let that theory that's critical about race come anywhere near me. Is there hope for our democracy? Are we this badly polarized? The answer is yes. And next year will be one of those years where Democrats better get your message in order. Better figure out what the message is. Because clearly what's going on in Virginia, not something you want to enter into 2022 having on your plate. This is not a good day. And I know I had somebody email me say, no, it's closer than you think, Rick. It's gonna come around. We'll see. I'm hoping it's closer than it is now. But at this moment, where you're at is in this spot where those two issues, that was it. Scary times. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1955. That was the day that the song 16 Tons first made an appearance on the Billboard Country Music Chart. It would reach the top spot and stay there for 10 weeks. 16 Tons told the story of the hard lives faced by coal miners. The song talks about falling into debt at the company store, a reality faced by many coal mining families. The song had first been recorded by Merle Travis in the mid-1940s. The song borrowed lyrics from things that Merle had heard from his father, who was a coal miner. Merle Travis sung the songs of working people. He was labeled a red and communist, and during that era, stations would not play his music. 16 Tons was recorded again by Tennessee Ernest Jennings Ford in 1955. Tennessee Ernie's grandfather and uncle had both been in the mines. Tennessee began to perform 16 Tons to enthusiastic crowds. He then recorded it as a B-side to his single, You Don't Have to Be a Baby to Cry, for Capitol Records. But the B-side recording became a hit. The song was so popular, it jumped off the country charts and took the pop music #1 spot for 8 weeks and became a gold record. Since then, 16 Tons has been covered by a variety of artists, from Johnny Cash to Tom Jones and Tom Morello to ZZ Top, and has become a true labor standard. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Call me 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So while what's going on in Virginia, and look, I'm predicting McAuliffe's going to lose, and you're going to have to deal with it. You're going to have to deal with the messaging that came out of it. And I argue, if Washington doesn't look as chaotic, if Manchin doesn't pull whatever the hell he's pulling, I think you got a better shot. If you had some things that you ran on and go, hey, look, we're making lives better. That's the message. The message is still, you got to bring home the bacon. And we've got to make people's lives better. So while I think the bipartisan infrastructure bill is extremely important, the other part of it is too. I think getting Granny some chompers and some hearing aids is a good thing. I think getting kids education, a great thing. Negotiating over prescription drug prices, an absolute no-brainer. But here to talk about if we get one, both, or none of those pieces of legislation, I've asked Tim Driscoll to come talk with us. Tim is the president of the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers, the BAC, the Bricklayers Union. Tim, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, good evening, Rick. Good to be with you this evening.
So, we're looking at what has been fairly chaotic in D.C., and I would argue a public pie fighting contest that should have never happened and should have never had to happen. So what are your thoughts? Do we get something out of all of this? At the end of the day, do they stop and get something done?
We do. Look, democracy is a messy process. I agreed. I'd like to have seen some of this hashed out before it hit the TV screens. But there's good pieces in both infrastructure and Build Back Better. We need them. They go together. It's not one or the other. That's the talking points of the Republicans, that we can't walk and chew gum. Well, guess what? We can, and we will.
And we better. I mean, ultimately, we better. Or 2022 is going to look like what's going on in Virginia, because at the end of the day, you got to make people's lives better. And both of these pieces of legislation do that. One on the side of getting the roads outside my house, paved, and getting us some broadband access that we desperately need, especially in rural communities. And then the other stuff that's going to help us when we get older, help our children. So much stuff that should have been done over the last 40 years.
Absolutely. Look, again, these two aren't in opposition to each other. They complement each other. We need the roads, we need the bridges, we need the infrastructure, but they all get us somewhere, right? At the end of the day, you get on a road, you get on a plane to go somewhere. And those places are the housing. It's where we get our health care. It's where our kids get educated. All those things go together. And you're right, Build Back Better has great things. Look, our members, bricklayers, tile setters, plasterers, point caulker cleaners, they all have the same needs. They have kids. They need pre-K, childcare, huge credits for those folks. For our retired members, hearing benefits, lower prescription, we're talking bread and butter issues. That's what we need. Those things have to happen together, and they will.
Yeah, no, this is where the Democrats need to get back to. While the Republicans right now are off on this loony fringe, I won't wear a mask, and I'm afraid of some theory that's critical. Democrats got to go, look, we care about the ham and eggers. We care about the people who are going out there doing the work, the families that need this stuff, but you got to get it done. Now, ultimately, I'm happy to, and I'm thrilled to hear a labor leader go, yeah, we care about both. Because normally, hey, we want the work. We want those roads. We want those bridges. We want that work to be done, right?
And we do. There's no contradiction in those two things. This false argument that's being proffered, the folks who are now suddenly fiscal conservatives, when for years we ran up trillions of dollars in debt for tax cuts, for wars overseas that didn't benefit working people. Now we have legislation that can actually improve our lives. Yeah, count me in. I'm there.
Yeah. Now, again, Manchin seemed the other day to say, he needs this strategic pause because he's afraid that it's too much. And I've got this position, and maybe you'll disagree. Coming from one of the poorest states in the country, wouldn't you think that, big and chunky and bold is something that you need to bring home to help make West Virginia a better place for working people? And maybe even go, hey, use the power of being the most important senator to go, hey, we want that new technology, those solar plants. We want those geothermal plants to come right there to West Virginia. That just seems like common sense to me.
And Rick, I think at the end of the day, Senator Manchin will be there with us. Joe knows who his constituents are. It's not playing out ideally the way we would have scripted it, but he knows he's got to deliver for West Virginians. And the best chance he's got of doing that is both Build Back Better and infrastructure. So we're going to get there. It's going to take a little longer than we'd like, but I'm confident that that's in the cards.
Are you concerned as I am that, I know we're talking about it's going to take a little bit longer and hopefully we get there and all this stuff. Are you concerned like I am that it's going to take so long that it doesn't matter in the next election cycle and that you end up in a scenario that where maybe down the road we have a Republican, Senate and a Republican House that basically waters all that stuff down in the years after?
Look, that's a fair concern. And we know we face headwinds heading into a midterm, right? Historically, with two exceptions in the last 100 years, that is an absolute hurdle for the incumbent party that holds the White House to get over. But what looks important a year from now versus what's happening right now, I agree with you. If we're writing the script and we think Virginia is it, I'm not sure that will be it unless we allow ourselves to fall asleep here on this. But I think if we hit the issues that we talked about earlier, if we're talking about delivering childcare for working families, we're talking about improving PK, we're talking about improving Medicare for seniors for some of the services they don't get right now. I think those are all winning pieces. And we put people to work. We've got a good economy, but could be a lot better. We're going to be in a much better position come this time next year.
Especially because the reality of the building trades are no longer just a male-dominated field. There are a lot of women coming into the building trades, and we need policies that are more family-friendly than we've seen in the past. And I think the Build Back Better plan does some of that. And the fact that they pulled out the just the minor paid family leave time in there is quite concerning to me.
No, agreed. You're right. Look, every industry in this country, and construction is no exception, needs to be welcoming and friendly to the next generation, both men and women. Absolutely, the women bear the brunt of childcare, rearing, but the men are affected just as much. I can't think that there's a single individual out there who's a father to children who doesn't want to know those things are taken care of. So we need to take off those sort of blinders that make this a male-female issue. It's just a human issue. It's what we want to do for each other. It's the kind of workplace people want to go into. And that's what we need to do. That's what the building trades are becoming.
No, you're absolutely right. Now, for me in the Build Back Better plan, as a labor guy, I want to see some help in organizing. And there's still something there. They haven't gutted out yet. It's some fines that I think are important. Up to $50,000 fines for unfair labor practices, up to $100,000 fines for illegally firing someone. I think that's helpful. For a lot of places, not going to matter to Amazon or these giant corporations, but I think it could be helpful.
No question. And so what you're referring to there, and we believe it's going to survive the parliamentarians' review in the Senate as to whether or not it fits within the four corners of a reconciliation package. But those increased fines are critical because right now, as you know, an employer is free to violate employees' rights, our ability to organize. And basically at the end of the day, they put up a sign that says, oops, my bad, we're back to square one. Put some real money out there, put some teeth in this, and we'll get somewhere because we know people want to be organized. The problem for us isn't bringing people into the union. The problem is for us competing with contractors who adhere to no standards. Just give us the opportunity to create a level playing field and we'll do the rest.
Yeah, it's what we desperately need in this country, and not just in the building trades, but across every industry.
Absolutely. No question. And look, there's so many pieces that are out there. Look, when we get pre-K and childcare, what's going to be covered in there is construction activity related to expanding those facilities, work for the building trades. When we get into some of the clean energy aspects with tax credits, labor standards attached to it. So these things have positives both on the work site and back in our communities. And that's what we do. We don't represent our workers just for 8 hours a day. We're with them around the clock from when they sign their apprenticeship papers to when they resign and retire into pension status. That's what we want to do. We want to make sure people are taken care of all the way through.
Yeah, it's important. Not too long ago, we had Jimmy Williams from the Painters Union on talking about why windmills are important to the Painters Union. He goes, there's a lot of paint on those windmills, And you go,
Truly.
yeah, that's a lot of work. And it's the kind of work that we need. We need to be growing that kind of work, getting people back to doing stuff and earning a good union wage on top of it.
Yeah, look, and for us, specifically, so some of the things we're interested in are carbon capture and sequestration. That work will actually involve our materials, our building process. So everything that's green is not, as some of our friends on the far right want to paint it as job killers. They're actually job creators. We need to be creative. It's going to look different than what came before, but that's been the case. If I found a bricklayer from 50 years ago and showed him what a job site looked like today, he wouldn't recognize it. We need to get going and we need to be there ahead of the curve.
Now that's the kind of attitude that we need in the labor movement. This idea that we need to be moving forward, and not stuck in the buggy whips, which is one of those brushes that labor gets painted with.
Yeah, and unfairly so, of course, because look, labor, if nothing else, you go back in some of the nomenclature, right? We have business representative, business agents. What all that implies is that we understand the businesses we're in, whether it's construction, whether it's manufacturing. We're well attuned to what it takes for an employer to make money, how we make the money, and what our role in that is. And we're constantly evaluating that. We have to. It's our responsibility.
So what do people have to do to get this moving forward? Look, at the end of the day, we're in this spot where there seems to be a log jam. What do you want people to do? What are you telling your members to do in this moment?
Yeah. So look, I think the most critical thing that we can do is continue to communicate, as you said early on, which is these are worker issues. Put that lens on, whether you're talking to your senator, your representative. If you view these things through that lens, at the end of the day, we have to get these two pieces together. And we think we're going to get there. Taking a little longer than we'd like, but I'm confident that that's the outcome we're headed for.
Are you happy with Joe Biden's leadership on this so far?
You know, Joe understands, if no one else, the Hill better probably than anyone else who's ever occupied that office. I'm still thrilled every day when we have a president who doesn't stumble over the word saying labor, doesn't stumble over the word union. His heart, the people he's appointed, everyone from the Secretary of Labor through the Commerce Secretary, people that we can have conversations with. To say that that's a sea change is an understatement. Right now, we've got opportunities. And frankly, it's on us as well to make sure we seize those opportunities. So yeah, I am. I'm pleased with the administration. Can always do more, but it's been a good start.
Yeah, no, I'm thrilled. In fact, just last week I was marching on a picket line with the Secretary of Labor here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, at the Kellogg strike, and commenting on, look, it's great to have someone from the administration actually on a picket line.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, he gets it. And if one was to go back and actually read the National Labor Relations Act, they'd understand that the U.S. government actually promotes the formation of unions, not standing there as a neutral that says, oh, Amazon today, maybe labor tomorrow. It's like, no, workers have the right to collectively get together and determine wages, working conditions, how they're going to perform their jobs going forward. That's a sea change.
No, and he's doing his job. I mean, this was the thing that I found most interesting. We just came out of 4 years of the National Labor Relations Board, basically beating up workers, to now one that's going to be an advocate to getting them their rights. In fact, it just came out the other day that they got back wages and fines, far above what the year before and the year before that had been. That was a good sign to me.
Absolutely. Both at the Labor Board and OSHA. Just think about that. Now, remember, we had no director of OSHA for 4 years when Donald Trump was in. 4 years, not 4 days, not 4 months, 4 years. This administration is going to make sure those types of inequities are addressed, and we can't ask for a better partner in that respect.
No, it's something we absolutely need, and as I've been saying for a while, it's good to have somebody who will fight for working people. Do you think the fine part of it stays? I mean, there's been some talk of maybe that getting yanked out like they did with the free college. Are we confident that part stays?
So I think if we get past the parliamentarian, I think that does. I think there's support there within all parts of the Democratic both on the House and the Senate side. Look, it's going to be challenged legally. We know that, but look, we take that one step at a time.
Yeah, and now last bit here I got for you, because again, I want
Sure.
I want actions. What are you telling members? Should we call in people? Should we be writing letters? Should we be marching in the streets? What should people be doing to get this moving in a direction that gets done?
Yeah, no, what we're asking our members to do is to communicate, and it's in a focused way with those members, that we've got to have both infrastructure and build back better. And it's been receptive by and large. What we're hearing back from our members who get to their town halls back in the home district, they're not hearing anything to the contrary. So what we need to make sure is that what they're saying back home in the district is what they're living to up here. And that's going to be job one for us for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Do you see any chance of just the hard infrastructure bill passing, as Joe Manchin seems to think is possible?
I don't. And I think Joe is going to be where, again, look, the number is not going to be what we want. When the decision was made to separate these pieces, and look, hindsight is easy in retrospect. We knew there was going to be this battle going on, but we've got to have both pieces. I think everyone in the Democratic caucus understands that. Joe wants that, and I think we're going to deliver it for him at the end of the day.
Yeah, I hope Joe wants that. I really do, because we need it. Is there any scenario which you think, and this was my fear from the beginning, that we get nothing?
No, that's because I think that's just mutually assured destruction between whatever warring factions we want to see within the Democratic Party. I think at the end of the day, common sense prevails. Takes a little longer than we'd like, but it has to.
Yeah. Are you concerned that nobody's asked the Republicans why none of them are supporting this? Why we're focusing on Manchin and Sinema and not one Republican?
You're absolutely right, Rick. Look, it bothers me when I hear infrastructure bill referred to as the bipartisan infrastructure bill, because it passed with 19 Republicans. And so that equates to 38%. And if my daughter had ever come home with 38% on a test, I would have said you failed. And I'm sorry, they get no credit on that.
There you go.
front.
I agree. Tim, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Thanks so much.
Absolutely, Rick. Good to be with you. Good night.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1928. That was the day that police shot at protesting union workers at Prince's Pier in Melbourne, Australia. 3 union workers were injured, 1 fatally. Each day, the workers on the wharf had to muster or gather and hope to be picked for a job by one of the shipping companies. The practice often led to corruption and inconsistent work for the men. The Waterside Workers' Federation Union sought an end to the hiring method. The union had been formed in 1901 to represent workers on the waterfront in response to the dangerous and often brutal working conditions workers toiled under. The ship companies were determined to undermine the union's influence. They had the support of conservative Prime Minister Stanley Bruce. And on this fateful day, armed police brought in non-union workers to Prince's Pier. 1,000 union workers lined the docks to protest against this scab labor. Skirmishes broke out between the police and union workers. The police fired into the crowd. One of those bullets found the neck of Australian World War I veteran Alan Whitaker. Whitaker, like many men, had returned to Australia after the war, seeking work on the docks. It took 3 excruciating months for Whitaker to die from his wound. The shooting was declared justified. In 2010, a group of local historians and union members organized to look further into the case. An article published in the Sydney Morning Herald under the headline, "The Truth Was the First Casualty of the 1928 War on the Waterfront." It concluded the original investigation had been a whitewash. Whitaker's story, like those of workers who died fighting for dignity at the workplace, is up to us to uncover, pass on, and remember. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I saw over the weekend that there had been some movement, possibly an agreement on steel tariffs with the EU and the U.S. And I'm going, could this be a good thing? I'm not sure. I should probably find out, which is why I've asked my next guest to come share some thoughts on, well, this grand deal that could be a good thing. That's why I've asked Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. These are the folks who, well, they're fighting for our steel industry and fighting to bring manufacturing back to our shores. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it is great to be with you tonight.
So let's jump right into this. I saw the agreement that we're going to reduce the tariffs, do something on potentially dumping maybe, but a coordinated kind of effort in addressing China. I'm not thinking this is bad.
Yeah. I think it's the best way to characterize it is that it is a fair deal. It's a fair deal for steelworkers. It's a fair deal for the steel manufacturers. It's a fair deal for the industries that have been subject to the retaliation from the European Union. You know, they've had 25% tariffs on bourbon and Harley Davidsons and a whole bunch of stuff since Trump put these tariffs into effect in 2018. And it's a fair deal for the climate, for climate goals too. And, you know, just to give a little bit of background about why we're here in the first place, you know, in 2018, the Trump administration decided after a lot of debate and delay to impose 25% tariffs on all imported steel at the beginning. Now, they gradually rolled that back. They took them off of Mexico. They took them off of Canada. They made a deal with Australia. They made a quota deal with Korea and a quota deal with Brazil. And so the Biden administration a few months ago said, you know, we're going to seek to make a deal with the European Union on this. And you know, let's be honest here. The European Union is not China when it comes to trade cheating, but it's also not angelic. Okay, so it had some challenges. And so what does this mean? This basically means that there's a quota set. So steel below a certain number of millions of metric tons can come into the United States every year at the regular tariff rate. But if it gets above that total, then a 25% tariff would kick in. That's to prevent import surges and to provide some level of protection for the industry. Now, in return, what happens, the Europeans take their retaliatory tariffs off of bourbon and all that other stuff, number one. Number two, they agree that the steel they're sending to the United States under this quota system has to be what's called melted and poured in the European Union, that
Right.
It can't be Russian steel coming in or Chinese steel coming in that they're then fabricating and coming into the United States. And number three, they're going to work with the United States to come up with a steel trade climate plan that's going to seek to decarbonize steel as much as possible and hold China to account, because China is way behind on all of this stuff, and particularly way behind on the American producers and the European producers for making this happen. So this is certainly a fair deal. It could be a good deal. You know, if we get the infrastructure bill passed, that's another great shot in the arm for the steel industry in the United States, because you think of the rebar, the structural steel, all the stuff that would get made there, as well as the Build Back Better plan that's still coming together. you think renewable energy and wind turbines. Well, under that, there's a Made in America provision that says you're going to get the tax credits if the products are made in the United States. So this is potential. This is certainly fair. This is potentially very good for steelworkers in the United States as well.
The second part you brought up about the poured and melted in the EU. How are you going to track that? This is one of those things where it sounds good on paper. How do you track that?
Yeah, well, there'll have to be some verification. So that's obviously very important. And we know the steel makers that are likely to pass through steel that's coming from Russia and China. For instance, Bow Steel bought an Italian operation. Bow Steel is the largest steel company in the world. It's owned by the Chinese government. Okay, so that's one focal point. Another is there's a Russian steel company that has operations in Europe. So you look there. But I think the monitoring of that is going to be very, very important as we move ahead. And so the work is yet to come on that. But that's something that I know that our U.S. Trade Representative's office is very aware of, and the Commerce Department. And Rick, I would just say this: everybody in the Biden administration, from the president on down, has made sure to seek the input of steelworkers as this was being put together, so that it would be done in a manner that's fair. And you know what? I like that. I think that's welcome, because usually who's writing our trade agreements, who's writing our trade policy? The big multinational companies and their lobbyists.
Yep.
And so it's nice to have domestic workers to have a seat at the table. And that is one of the refreshing changes of the Biden administration when it comes to trade policy.
No, I'm thrilled about that. But on the climate side, and Joe Biden said that this agreement would crack down on dirty steel. And as you pointed out, China is the biggest carbon emissions person in the country in the world. Now, we historically have been that, and we're still quite high. But China's right now, they're without question, hands down, they're number one. And this, they're saying, is going to help maybe rein some of that in. But, I saw a comment by John Kerry, I guess it was back, I don't know, maybe January, I think, where he called climate a critical standalone issue, and said that he believed that the U.S. and China needed to find a way to compartmentalize the climate discussion, to which his counterpart in China said, no. He said, I quote, U.S.-China climate change cooperation cannot be separated from the larger environment of U.S.-China relations. And the fact that Xi Jinping didn't show up to the climate summit this weekend, I think kind of points in that direction. So on the climate front, if you've got the number one polluter not showing up and also saying, look, if you don't give us what we want and let us keep eating your lunch, nothing for you, this doesn't bode well, I don't think.
Yeah, it is tricky. I completely agree. I do think that enlisting allies in this effort is going to be the way to go, rather than kind of a go it alone approach, just the U.S. versus China. I don't think that sets up anybody for great success. But, if we enlist, Mexico and Canada and the European Union and Japan and the United Kingdom, and we're able to form an agreement that sets, carbon output goals for the steel sector. And why this is important, Rick, just so your listeners know, industrial output of carbon is one of the leading contributors, obviously, to carbon emissions in the United States. Right. And within that, steel is one of the largest single sectors of that. And this is also important because China makes almost 60% of the world's steel now. So if you deal with this issue and you deal with China in particular, you're making measurable progress on reducing carbon emissions. I mean, this isn't trivial. These would be major changes in carbon emissions. And so China will have a choice. They can have a seat at the table, or they're going to find themselves isolated. And I think, I think the other countries will be looking at other measures that will range from punitive from excluding Chinese steel, or to putting some sort of a border adjustable carbon fee on steel or steel containing products that are coming from China. And that may be the way to go. And the other thing China will need to do is rein in its steel industry, because they literally have what we would call zombie steel mills that are operating in China. They make way too much steel in normal times, not only for their own market, but for the rest of the world as well. And they're adding so much carbon output, and it has such a damaging effect, obviously, on the steel market around the world, but also on our climate as well. And so I think that it's imperative for the EU, the US, to follow up on this. And what's going to be very important, Rick, is that the US has been willing to provide some leadership on this, and now with Biden, they're very serious about this. The European Union has been reluctant to challenge China in the past on these issues. And so I hope that this agreement represents a step in the right direction to push the European Union in the right direction on China, steel, and climate policy as well.
I hope it pushes us back in a direction where we start talking about domestic production for domestic consumption, because this idea that we're going to move to a green economy, I got solar panels on my roof. Sadly, they were made in China. Couldn't find ones at the time made in the U.S. Because they were being crushed, because we didn't help protect those industries that were just coming up. Does it have to be, if we're going to move to a solar, windmill, geothermal future, does it have to be made in China?
No, it doesn't have to be. In fact, Biden said that in Pittsburgh. He said there's no reason why the windmills that will have the wind turbines have to come from Beijing. They should be coming from Pittsburgh. And the way you do that is through policy and incentives. That's how other governments have helped to grow their renewable energy manufacturing. I mean, Germany is a great example of this. There's no reason why Germany should have much or any solar manufacturing. It is a dark country that is northern. It does not have a comparative advantage in sunshine. Yet it has a massive solar structure because of government policies that are in place. And so it's as simple as that. If we have Buy American for solar, if we have the tax incentives, we will have solar manufacturing jobs in the United States. And we're seeing that already, because there are some tariffs in place, and they have helped generate new factories for solar panels and the solar supply chain in the U.S. This policy works if you give it a chance.
Yeah, I mean, sound policy, smart investment. It's what we need: leadership, visionary leadership. But yet, when I talk about U.S. made solar panels, all I get back thrown back at me from my Republican friends is Solyndra. Look at what Solyndra did. I'm going, yeah, you underinvested on it, and you didn't prioritize it. No wonder it failed.
Yeah. I mean, that the renewable energy funding that was in that, and God, that was so long ago now. That was 12 years ago, and people still bring this up. I mean, that was a one-off. It wasn't a sustained investment. And so you will have some that thrive, and you'll have a few that fail. And unfortunately, Republicans are focused on the one or two that didn't make it across the finish line. That always happens. That happens in any circumstance. So if you have the right policies, if you build the market to last for decades, you will get that investment. You will get those companies creating those jobs here in the United States, so that we're not just trading foreign oil for made in China solar panels, that we're doing it right here.
Yeah. Now, normally for me, it's too early to be talking about anything Christmas. But with the anticipated shortages and the supply chains that are struggling, we got to talk about what to get under the tree this year, and start, I guess, a little bit early. Personally, I'm done with all of my Christmas shopping, and I'm always done at this time of the year, because I get the easy stuff. I get things that are about the size of a bill, and I put them in an envelope because it's always the right size, and it's always the right color, and it never has to be returned. But for people who actually want to buy the boxes and stuff things in it and wrap it up, there are a lot of good places that manufacture stuff right here at home that we should be promoting.
Yeah, there are. And a little later this month, we're going to have a massive holiday gift guide come out on our website that will feature great gifts from literally all 50 states that are made in the United States. And of course, those products aren't sitting on a shipping container somewhere waiting to be offloaded at a port, because Walmart and all these other companies have hundreds of thousands of shipping containers that they send from China over here every year. And so we'll be highlighting that. And the great thing about a Made in America gift is that it delights someone. It's a total surprise when they get it. They're like, oh my God, we either they appreciate it because it's union made, or it's sustainable, or it's local, or it is to them, to a lot of folks, it's the novelty of finding a Made in America product, and it's far more meaningful.
Yeah.
And these are great quality products. Instead of having to buy 5 T-shirts that are going to last you, 4 washings each, you can buy a great T-shirt that's gonna last for 10, 15 years, assuming you can still fit into it.
Yeah, you remember the days of the old concert shirts that never seemed to, you had it forever. I bought my kids T-shirts, and they're falling apart because they're garbage. And this is where I keep coming back to. At some point, do we not go, the manufacturing we want done is quality manufacturing and not just cheap?
Yeah. Well, I know, because we've checked in with them, that, the companies that are making like great built to last products in the United States, in clothing and other sectors, they're doing very well right now. Because I do think there's more of a wake up call. I think it started during the pandemic about this. I think it's a little more widespread. Rick, the real problem here is that where consumers shop now places limitations on the kinds of Made in America products you get. If you look on Amazon, it's impossible virtually. 40% of the sellers on Amazon are actually literally based in China. They're not even based in the United States. They're based in China. If you go to a Walmart and you step outside the grocery aisle or their staples, because they do have some Made in America products, it's really hard to find Made in America. But literally, that's where most Americans are shopping. But if you're able to widen the lens a little bit and just do 5 minutes of research, you can find some really great products for everybody in the family. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to help some folks find a way.
Well, I am looking forward to that guide at the end of the month. Can't wait for you guys to get it out. And when you do, we will put it out and make sure people have the opportunity. But Scott, I appreciate the time, appreciate the work you do. Thanks so much.
Always, Rick. Great to be with you. Keep up the great work.
Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Make sure you check out their website, americanmanufacturing.org. A quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
What is so supreme about the Supreme Court? I mean, besides being housed in an imposing marble building, being the final stop on America's judicial train, and having its 9 members look photogenically authoritarian in those full-body black robes. And yes, its existence is written into the Constitution, but so is Congress, and no one thinks of it as anything supreme. We 330 million Americans are told we must obey the law as defined by a half-dozen unelected lawyers on this court. Why should we democratic citizens do that? After all, these legalistic elites have no actual power to force their personal beliefs on us. There's no Supreme Court army. In fact, their sole source of power is one that is intangible, extremely fragile, and easily frittered away: public trust. We should go along with their rulings only if they appear to be fair and honest, not based on personal whim or partisan ideology, and not meant to extend plutocratic power over the people. As Justice Elena Kagan rightly put it, the only way we can get people to do what we think they should do is because people respect us. That's where the present majority of far right-wing appointees have failed so abjectly. Rather than meeting a lofty standard of judiciousness, all six have pulled the court down into the mire of crass Republican politics. They've corrupted the system and jiggered the law to decree that corporate campaign cash is free speech, that the state can take over women's bodies, that the Republican Party can unilaterally shut millions of voters out of America's voting booths, and so awful much more that enthrones the few over the many. This is Jim Hightower saying, respect? Trust? The Republican court is already down to 40% public approval rating, having surrendered its legitimacy to be a governing authority over us. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Hightower Lowdown. You know who you are. Thank you.
The steel strike of 1919 was called the hunky strike because most of the workers were either first or second generation immigrants from Eastern and Central Europe. Up until the end of World War I, workers had benefited from shorter hours, better pay, and the promise of union recognition. Once the war came to an end, the mill owners pursued anti-union open shop policies and other cost-cutting measures. During the strike, there was near total suppression of all civil liberties. Major work issues included the 12-hour day, the 7-day work week, scores of workers being injured and maimed, union recognition, and poverty wages. Mary Harris, better known as Mother Jones, fought tirelessly throughout her life for social justice and human rights as a labor leader and a worker advocate. On August 20th, while visiting striking miners in Homestead, Pennsylvania, home of U.S. Steel's famous Homestead Steelworks, she defied injunctions against public gatherings and addressed 5,000 striking workers and their families. This speech led to her being arrested and jailed for giving an unauthorized speech. When brought before the judge, she was asked who had signed a permit to speak at a public gathering. She answered, Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams. As the strike went on, Mother Jones, the grandmother of all agitators, gave many speeches to rally the workers. One speech in Chicago was described by a spy for the U.S. War Department's Military Intelligence Division as the foulest and most profane that can be imagined, teeming with ultra-radical suggestions. Welcoming the spies, she would invite them to the front of the crowd so they could report her words accurately. This Rick Smith Show Labor History Moment was made possible by a grant from the Labor Education Center at IUP. For more information, visit www.thericksmithshow.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So things still not looking good in Virginia. And I know some of the emails I got, hold on, Rick, it's not over yet. And I love that, I love the ain't over till it's over mentality. But I got to tell you, I thought it was over before it began. McAuliffe is not a great candidate. I said that from the beginning. And like I said, Republicans, they got the jingo this time. They got that theory that's critical, and the babies with their beautiful faces covered by the masks. That brought them out. And, well, we're going to see what the next 4 years looks like in Virginia as they try and turn that state back to Alabama. Scary, scary stuff. Speaking of bad policy, though, I look at Ohio. A number of years ago, they went on that. Remember when all the craze was tort reform? We got to rein in these trial lawyers and these huge settlements. Because Stella with the coffee. Remember Stella with the coffee? They claim she got like $1 gazillion when the reality is that after it was all said and done, probably only got a couple $100,000. And what it was to pay for the damage that was done. But people were all got to make it business friendly. And Ohio did that. And there are unintended consequences. And here to share some thoughts on those unintended consequences, I've asked Jake Zuckerman to come talk with us. Jake is a journalist with the Ohio Capital Journal. He's got a piece out now, how a 2005 Ohio tort reform law has cost child rape victims millions. Jake, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Walk me through how what was supposed to be going after them, their trial lawyers and that medical malpractice, going to make the state of Ohio competitive with places like Texas and Mississippi. How's this hurting rape victims?
Right. So when you file a lawsuit, you're asking for damages, ostensibly. You're asking whoever wronged you in some way to give you money, essentially. And the legislature stepped in, and typically that is a decision left to juries. The juries hear the evidence and say, this is what the evidence shows, how one person was harmed, and this is the relief they're entitled to. And they're all different kinds of relief. And in this case, the legislature stepped in and said no damages for what are called non-economic losses. So those are things, they're not attached to your wage, but like pain and suffering, agony, stress, etc. That's capped at $250,000 unless you lose a limb or suffer some kind of deformity. So that consideration makes sense, but whether this is by design or by oversight, it turns out that this law has just been absolutely crushing these child rape victims. I mean, it's just taken millions of dollars that they're awarded in quote unquote non-economic damages and taking them down from, like in the case of Jessica Simpkins, who was raped by a priest. The church knew this priest had these inappropriate relationships with young girls. It kept him on as their priest. He rapes this girl. She wins $3.56 million. That judgment is stripped down. Non-economic losses come down to $250,000. She ends up walking home with about $500,000 after a $3.5 million judgment. Another victim, Amanda Brandt, had $20 million. That piece of her damages cut down to $250,000. I mean, it's really a pretty brutal law.
So the question that I have for you is: this a something that was a consequence of doing the law? Was this an unintended consequence, or was this, we need to stop all these lawsuits? And you know what, these church rape victim cases are costing a lot of money, and I know the church was lobbying on some stuff like this in other places. Do you think one, the other? Are you getting a feel?
So I think that's the million-dollar question, and virtually none of the sponsors, except one, were really willing to answer that question. I mean, that's the obvious question: is do you guys mean to do this? Steve Stivers, who's now the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, which at the time would have been its biggest backer, he was the lead sponsor. He wouldn't answer questions. A number of sponsors back in 2005, still in the legislature, they wouldn't answer questions. So, I mean, the best answer I can give you is I don't know. But in 2016 was when the Supreme Court ruled on that Jessica Simpkins case I mentioned. Whether or not they knew then, they certainly knew in 2016 that this was a problem. They've watched it. They've done nothing. Now the Supreme Court is going to hear a pretty similar case, the other one I mentioned, Amanda Brandt. They're going to hear it again. I don't know what the court's going to do, but I know the legislature has had about 5 years now in full knowledge of what this law is doing to child victims. It has not acted, despite a couple Democrats and even some Republicans trying to.
There doesn't seem to be the appetite to, because look, at the end of the day, when you can rein in the court system, because everyone thinks that Stella, and this really all started when Stella and the coffee and all of that stuff happened, because we got to rein in these onerous cases against business, and because what business wants, business gets, and yet when you go back and you learn about that case, third-degree burns over her genitals. All she was asking for was the cost of the medical bills. And as it went through the entire process, appeals and all that stuff, she basically got what she was asking for, not the big settlement the jury gave them. So the system worked without these kind of draconian caps that we don't need in place. At least that's my view.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't really have a view, but I think that it's clear that the business community and insurers were moving the ball here. There's no grassroots uprising to say we want punitive damage caps and we want non-economic damage. I mean, it's just kind of like a silly concept to imagine that as a galvanizing thing for ordinary Americans. This is really a big business-driven policy.
Yeah, I'm looking at this and I'm going, and I guess I'm struggling with the fact that they've known this for 5 years and haven't made this simple. Because I think this is one of those really simple things that could be fixed right away. A little carve out. Say, you know what? We're not going to protect pedophile priests. We're not protecting pedophiles. I don't know that that's a difficult stance.
Well, let me point you to another example here. We recently had an instance where all these victims at Ohio State, all these wrestlers, other athletes, turns out they were abused by Richard Strauss, university employed doctor. They had to go to him, power dynamics, the whole 9 yards. The facts aren't really in dispute. The only problem is they're past the statute of limitations. So basically, they're beyond the window with which you must file a lawsuit if you want your claims to be heard in court. Now, I think that there was a sense of political reality in the world that this Republican legislature is not just going to waive statute of limitations. So there was actually a bipartisan effort to say, how about this? How about we just carve out in the statute of limitations this really narrowly written idea that will just let these specific victims, who we know are victims, it's not in dispute, it will just let them bring a lawsuit against Ohio State. It doesn't even guarantee them a judgment. That bill didn't go anywhere. It didn't even get out of committee. So it's not exactly the same issue, but I think it's pretty clear that there's not a willingness, a political willingness to expose jurors to that kind of hit, to expose institutions to that kind of hit. You know, it's all about exposure here, and I don't think that the legislature.
I guess so much for your constitutional right to your day in court.
The Supreme Court would say you still have a right to the courtroom. You just don't have a right to the kind of judgments that you used to have in the courtroom. Now, like if you ask any of these plaintiffs' attorneys, some of these Democrats, even some of these Republicans, they'd say that's total crap. I mean, if you can only win, say they put the punitive damage cap at $1, the non-economic damage cap at $1, do you have a right to trial by jury? Sure, but what's the point if it costs, you know, less than the lawyer's bills? So I think that that's really at the crux of the claim. Do you really have your constitutional right to trial by jury if that right is so low?
Yeah, I would think at $1, I wouldn't think you have a constitutional right then, because isn't it $20? Doesn't the Constitution say $20?
Oh, I don't know. Oh God, you might have got me there.
You have a right to jury trial for anything over $20. That's what the Constitution says. So for $1, no, but for 21, yes.
Yeah, I wonder what lawyer you're going to pay with $21, but you let me know if you find him.
Yeah, none. And this is the part of the problem I have with these business-friendly laws, that they write so broadly to basically crush people's ability to hold folks accountable. And I think back to, I grew up in Cleveland, you know, years and years ago, and you know there was a guy who was our athletic director, who had, you know, was well known as being a kid toucher. And when it finally came out that, you know, someone came forward who fit in the statute of limitations, which I had thought and hoped they had done away with because of this guy back in, I think it was 1987, they finally caught up with him. They found that, you know, men and boys had come forward from like 50 years earlier in West Virginia and all across Ohio, you know, like 200 of them, you know, came out of the woodworks and say, yeah, he was doing this stuff with me. And everybody knew it. And, well, there was only one kid who could have done anything about it because he fell in the statute of limitations. And it's crazy to me that that's today still in place.
Yeah, I believe it has been extended, actually. There's a special extension in the statute of limitations for child rape victims, but even that, it's maybe 25 years. You know, it's not indefinite. And there are real concerns. You know, we have statute of limitations, especially in criminal law, because if the government wants to say that you must go to jail, it has X amount of time to do so. But there are all kinds of ways that you can creatively think around that. For instance, you can do away with civil statutes of limitation and keep criminal law. You could narrowly tailor these kind of exemptions around these rape, like kind of these mass serial rape cases that clearly there are more of them than there were understood to be 10, 20 years ago. I mean, there are all kinds of ways you could go at this problem, but you have to try. And I think that this case makes it pretty clear that the legislature is, you know, this isn't like some feat of investigative reporting. These are opinions from the Supreme Court. Anyone can get them online. They're not a secret. The legislature knows about them. They've been sent them. They've been asked to comment about them. They have declined. I mean, there's just clearly no appetite to really.
So how much of this is the fact that you've got a very gerrymandered you know, General Assembly there? You've got a very gerrymandered House and Senate, and it's only getting worse from what I understand because of the new maps that are coming out, and that, you know, the people's will be damned, because I can't imagine there's anybody going, no, child rape victims, they shouldn't be allowed to sue. I can't imagine that's a thing.
You know, I don't know to what extent gerrymandering plays into this, because I think that the Chamber of Commerce has lasted longer than district lines will. It has power. No one wants to be anti-business. Nobody wants to take on the insurer. I mean, I think the problem is really there's no one. If gerrymandering is the problem, at least in a Republican primary, you'd think that someone would step in and say, "I love guns. I love coal. I'm pro-life, but I'm against children getting touched, and I'm against the children who did get touched having no recourse under the law to do anything about that." And even that's not happening. I mean, I think that someone just needs to make this an issue.
Yeah.
To do something.
And I think
Democrats.
I think you writing this piece is important, because I got to tell you, as I was reading through it, I'm outraged. I'm going, if that's my kid, well, if it's my kid, there's a different trial going on. And I'm probably me being sued, but that's a whole nother story. But, I can't imagine this not going somewhere else.
Yeah, well, I did. So I talked to Jim Hoops, who is now a committee chairman. He was a sponsor of the bill in 2005, and he's back now as a lawmaker. And actually, this didn't make the article, but he made some comments of, I think that when there are people like that out there, we should just beat the hell out of them, street justice. And that sounds good. It feels good. But we are a nation of laws. I mean, that goes back to John Adams. We're not a country of men. We're a country of laws. We don't just beat people up in the streets. We take them to court. That's where we air our grievances. And if the laws aren't allowing us to do that, we change the laws. So to hear a lawmaker, A, refuse to acknowledge error, B, refuse to change the laws, and C, suggest this kind of vigilante justice because it sounds cool and you can beat your chest about it, I think it's a pretty lame answer to the question.
No, I agree with you. But here's the thing. I do agree with some vigilante justice on an individual level, not as part of our law and our legal structure. I think there's a difference. I think there's a difference of saying someone in his position saying, I would go out and take care of him myself, as opposed to me, who's just a guy with a microphone. Someone in a position of actually making law, I think that's a lot more dangerous.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess last question I've got for you on this: what are you hoping comes out of this article? What are you hoping comes from this?
I guess I hope. What I want to know is this by oversight or is this by design? I mean, someone just has to answer that damn question.
Yeah.
Steve Stivers has to answer that question. Are they going to do anything about this? That's what I want.
And that's I'm amazed. It's been 5 years, nothing done. But I guess I shouldn't be, because until then, I guess there hadn't been any real outcry. I'm hoping your story builds that groundswell up. But Jake, I appreciate the time. Great work there at the Ohio Capital Journal. Hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
Thanks for having me on, Rick. Appreciate the kind words.
Good stuff as always. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at Jake's article. It's good stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. That was the day members of the industrial workers of the world began a free speech fight in Spokane, Washington. Wobblies often intersected seasonal workers through street corner soapboxing. Many towns and cities worked to resist IWW organizing efforts by passing ordinances against such rallies. Wobblies challenged these repressive tactics. They would descend on a town or city in great numbers, forcing mass arrests that overwhelmed local authorities and judicial systems. At Spokane, the organizing campaign began a year earlier. Wobblies mobilized against local employment agencies that charged workers fees for jobs that didn't exist. The campaign was so popular that the IWW was able to establish a union hall, hold meetings and lectures, and establish a newspaper. The Spokane City Council quickly passed an ordinance against street corner rallies. When Wobblies learned that religious groups were exempt from the restrictive ordinance, they announced November 2nd as Free Speech Day in Spokane. They put out the call, wanted men to fill the jails of Spokane. By the end of the month, as many as 500 had been arrested. The War Department even offered up nearby Fort Wright to handle the glut of prisoners. A young Elizabeth Gurley Flynn arrived in Spokane to soapbox. Efforts to arrest her were briefly frustrated after she chained herself to a nearby lamppost. Flynn made good use of her time in jail. She reported on appalling prison conditions and accused the local sheriff of operating a brothel out of the women's prison section. The free speech fight gained nationwide attention and enjoyed wide public support. By March, all prisoners were released, the ordinance had been rescinded, and employment agencies' license revoked. The IWW won big.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
No, I mean, it's disgusting. And look, you remember I guess it's been about 15 years ago that there was that whole push it was mainly medical malpractice, because, we can't have doctors, the malpractice insurance is way too expensive. We can't protect our doctors. And a bunch of states went to this kind of tort reform, which all it was capping the amount of damages, the pain and suffering money that people were getting. When you go in and I've done this, I had a surgery on my left leg, and I wrote on the right one, not this one, because you don't want the wrong thing being operated on. And what was happening is in those places where you were having these malpractice instances, people weren't being able to, really, they're not able to collect on anything. And, one of the cases that I remember that stuck out in my head was in Texas. And this is going back a long time ago. Because the debate was a doctor was performing a circumcision and got a little lax with the knife and ended up taking it all off. Not just the little stuff around the top, all of it. And the question is how much is that worth? How much is a lifetime of, you were born a boy, guess not now. And this was before all the transgender stuff, so he didn't even have a choice to do that. This was just nothing. How much is that worth? And I guess in the state of Ohio, I guess they did carve that out. But in Texas, it wasn't worth very much. And you go, how do you come up with a number for that? And then how do you cap it? And what they found in Texas, and this was the most interesting part of it, on the medical malpractice part of it, insurance premiums didn't really come down. It didn't save them any money. It was just punitive. And it was one of these things where you go, well, we'll get those trial lawyers, because there's this misbelief that somehow trial lawyers are mostly Democrats, which is weird because, every lawyer loves money. But, on the sex abuse side, I brought up the athletic director we had in the high school that I went to. And everybody knew. In fact, my mother had graduated from that high school years earlier and had used him as an example when I was a little kid of who to stay away from. And I remember her words, vividly. And when I met the guy, I'm like, oh, wow, this is bad. This guy's bad, because my mother passed away when I was 13, and I ended up living with my grandparents and going to that school. And within the first week of me being in that school, that guy sought me out. And, put his arm around me and, we're going to be buddies. And I'm like, no, we're not, because I know you. You don't know I know you, but I know you. And, I had graduated. It was a couple years after I graduated that, the floodgates opened. And it was one of those open secret things that everybody knew. The community knew. It was not unknown. And this was a guy who was really prominent. His name was all over the football field, the baseball field, the nanatorium. His name was everywhere. This guy was an institution. And yet all of the stories that were out there that, nobody came forward until one kid. And then the floodgates opened. And then that's when you found out 2-year statute of limitations. So those people that went to school with my mother a couple decades before, the people that, he had 40, 50 years earlier, sorry, you don't matter. That's how screwed up our laws were. And now this, that you can't go back and get damages for that, is just insane to me. And I would argue, and this is where maybe I'm just jaded, when I look at Republican policy, especially the pro-business policies, that they don't care about people. They don't care about people's lives. They certainly don't care about children who have been molested. They use them when we need to politically to pull at people's heartstrings. But protecting insurers at all costs, that's the goal. Because insurance companies aren't in business to hand out money. They're in business to make sure that they don't have to hand out money, and that's how they lobby and spend so much money on lobbying, and the Catholic Church as well. And not just the Catholic Church, most of them. Because we hear a lot of the religion pimps doing a lot of things that they shouldn't be doing. And for me, that monetary deterrent is a big part of that. If you're going to lose the church, maybe you don't keep the pedophile around. Maybe you move him along. Maybe into an institution, not another church, not another place for them to take advantage of another generation of kids. So for me, and I know Jake Zuckerman's looking for the answer of, was this intentional? My view, and look, he's got to be middle of the road. He's a good journalist. I like his writing. I think he does a great job. Me sitting here going, I would bet $1. I would bet my last dollar on this was an intention. This was a part of, this is what we're going to do. Just my thought. Going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1955. That was the day that the song 16 Tons first made an appearance on the Billboard Country Music Chart. It would reach the top spot and stay there for 10 weeks. 16 Tons told the story of the hard lives faced by coal miners. The song talks about falling into debt at the company's store, a reality faced by many coal mining families. The song had first been recorded by Merle Travis in the mid-1940s. The song borrowed lyrics from things that Merle had heard from his father, who was a coal miner. Merle Travis sung the songs of working people. He was labeled a red and communist, and during that era, stations would not play his music. 16 Tons was recorded again by Tennessee Ernest Jennings Ford in 1955. Tennessee Ernie's grandfather and uncle had both been in the mines. Tennessee began to perform 16 Tons to enthusiastic crowds. He then recorded it as a B-side to his single, You Don't Have to Be a Baby to Cry, for Capitol Records. But the B-side recording became a hit. The song was so popular, it jumped off the country charts and took the pop music #1 spot for 8 weeks and became a gold record. Since then, 16 Tons has been covered by a variety of artists, from Johnny Cash to Tom Jones and Tom Morello to ZZ Top, and has become a true labor standard. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Call me 'cause I can't go. Oh my.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, big, bold headline today at the Buffalo News. Big, bold headline. Catholic Health spending tens of millions of dollars, tens of millions, to keep Mercy Hospital operating amid strike. They go on and talk to the CEO because they're going on strike, and they've brought in this Michigan staffing company. They brought in a scab company to replace the nurses who are on strike. And the CEO said, this Mark Sullivan, he says it's tens of millions of dollars we're spending, but it's to take care of those patients that we need to take care of, because now he cares about the patients. He goes on to say it's what we're doing. We're doing that. It wasn't a choice we made. It was the hand we were dealt. And I got to tell you, my reaction was no. This was not the hand you were dealt. This is what you chose. Period. End of statement. You chose this path. The honest statement was said, yes, we're spending tens of millions of dollars needlessly, and we did this by choice so that we could keep our workers in place. Because we know that if we're going to bring in scab nurses, it's going to cost multiples of what these workers were asking for. That would have been the honest statement. And here to share some thoughts on, the president and CEO statement of they're wasting tens of millions of dollars that they could have been using to pay the 2,200 nurses and workers at that hospital a living reasonable wage. That's why I've asked Lori Wawrzyniak to come talk with us. She's a float nurse at Mercy Hospital in Buffalo. They've been on strike since October 1st. Lori, thanks for taking time for us.
No problem.
So I'm getting this statement from the president and CEO, who I understand pockets something around $2-3 million a year himself, saying, hey, this is the hand. We were dealt this hand. We've got to spend the tens of millions. When you see that, what do you think?
I mean, it is disgusting. And honestly, ultimately we feel like we deserve a pay raise. But the day we walked out on strike, really, that was the back of our minds. It was really about our patients. It was our staffing. It was our safety. And that is the last thing that's left on the table right now. Everything else has pretty much been figured out. That is the last piece of the puzzle right now, is for him to give us our proper staffing. We need that to be able to take care of these patients safely. That's it. We just need a yes from him. Yeah. It's on the table. Just do it.
Now, this idea that there's no money, I mean, because part of it is, we just can't afford to do it. No, you can't afford to do it. You just pissed away tens of millions of dollars that you could have easily at the beginning go, yeah, we do need better staffing lever because we do care about our patients, and we want to show that we care about our patients, like he's trying to do in this statement.
Right. And like you said, not too far before the strike happened, the announcements of building another hospital in Lockport. There's plenty of money for that. There's rumor that there's been some other buildings surrounding Mercy Hospital that Catholic Health has also purchased. The money's there. They just don't want to give it to us.
Now, as I understand, there are 2,200 striking workers today. And look, this is a huge undertaking. So for me, when you see 2,200 people go, it's bad enough that we're going to walk out onto the picket line, stop collecting a paycheck, leave behind the patients that you care for, you love and adore. That it had to be. This has to be a big, to steal a Joe Biden frame, a BFD.
It is. It was the hardest decision we all had to make. I mean, our whole lives are built around taking care of people. And it got to the point where it was impossible to do that. We were not able to take care of the patients we needed to anymore. It's killing us. We cannot wait to get back in that building and do what we do best. And like I said, it's the ball is in Catholic Health's court right now. The union and the morale is still there on the picket lines. We're going to keep fighting until we get what we need. No matter what he says about people wanting to come back into the building, I haven't heard one person say that they're going to give up yet and come in there until we get what we need. We need that safe staffing. We need all the things that we need. Catholic Health has what we need. They just have to say yes to it, and the strike can be over.
Yeah. or it never had to happen. This is the part that gets me. It
Never
never
had
had
to
to happen because, the claim that, well, we just can't afford it. Well, evidently you can afford to piss away $10 million in a month, little over a month, where, had you said, yeah, we'll figure this out and we'll not have the disruption, instead of pointing back at you guys saying, well, this was the hand we dealt. Look what they did to us. No, you did this to yourself, Mr. President.
They're giving these nurses $150, $160 an hour, like triple what we were getting paid in that hospital. And even the staffing ratios, from what we heard, each nurse in there right now has one aide working with them, and they have 2 patients to take care of. 2 patients to take care of with an aide for $160 an hour. We were running a quarter of that for an hourly rate, and we were taking care of 8, 9 patients with no aide.
See, this is where I go back to the table. I got to be honest with you, Lori. I know you said all the other stuff has been settled. It's just the staffing part that's left. I got to tell you, I got to go back to the table and go, look what you're willing to pay for our services. You've now shown us what we are worth. We'll take that, please.
Exactly. It's, I just, it's mind boggling. You don't, and like I said, yes, all those things matter to us, and it makes us sick. It makes us sick to see how they've been given so much to these people who aren't their core staff. We're the community. Most of the people that work in that hospital are born and raised around South Buffalo. We're taking care of people who are our friends and family and neighbors. We love these people. We've given our blood, sweat, and tears, and they can't even give us anything in return. And they're willing to give people from out of state who've got no connection to the community or the people quadruple what they were going to give us. It's amazing.
It is crazy. Now, again, you were talking about staffing levels, and you said that, the numbers are mind blowing. You're like 2 patients per nurse, which is, I think, wow, if you could get that, what kind of, I don't like, getting into too many details, but there have got to be horror stories when you've got to deal with 8, 9 patients at a time, and you got 3 or 4 of them ringing the bell at the same time saying, hey, I need you, and you can't possibly be in 3 places at once, and that's got to be one, heart-wrenching for you, but dangerous for patients, no?
And it is, because, prime example, leading up to the strike, we had patients who the call light was going off so long, and they had to go to the bathroom. Something simple, like just help to go to the bathroom. They were getting up and falling and hitting their heads. And that's not even why they were there. No. We also had a situation where there was a code in the hospital where a patient needed to be resuscitated. The nurses were so short at that point that while they're trying to resuscitate one patient, another patient coded, and they couldn't even go over to that patient. You're playing God at that point. Who lives, who dies, and then it's up to us to have to put our heads on the pillow at night and wonder, did we do the right thing? And management didn't care. They didn't care. It's our nursing license that we fought so hard to earn that we're putting at risk to lose, so that this hospital's constantly making a profit. It's all about, just get the job done. Just get the job done. I don't care if you have 9 or 10 patients.
But isn't this
But this is what we go home dealing with every day.
Right, but isn't this a nonprofit hospital?
It is. It is. And that's another thing. I know there's been talk that they were going to start looking into why is someone who is working for a nonprofit organization making so much money. It doesn't make sense. It's not right.
No, it's not right. And this CEO, as I understand, pocketing somewhere like $2-3 million. I saw like $2-3 million. I'm going, how is that possible? This is a Catholic. When I was a kid, the Catholic charity hospitals, the hospitals there, they were run by people as part of the church, and they didn't make $2 or $3 million. They made, maybe 5-6 times what the nurses were making.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, I mean, I don't know what a CEO does at the end of the day, but the heart and soul is inside that hospital. That's what's running that business.
Yeah, I don't care. I don't care what he does.
That's where that money goes.
Don't care what he does. I don't care. I don't care if he's got a bat phone to God himself. No administrator's worth $3 million. Nobody. I don't care what you're doing, because you're not actually taking care of the people. I'm struggling with this. So let me ask you this, because I can tell that this is hard for you. How are your coworkers taking these moments? I mean, this has been a lengthy strike. You're now 5 weeks into this. How's the morale? How are folks taking it on the picket line?
It's tough because honestly, we are going without a paycheck. Unemployment, we haven't gotten it. The only money we have coming in is through our strike fund right now, which is not enough to get through a week. We're very supportive. Like I said, we're very close knit. People don't understand why we want to stay working there. Why would you stay working for a company who doesn't care about you? Because at the end of the day, we care about each other. We're family inside there. We're all supporting each other. We're making sure that if someone's struggling, we're staying on top of it. The union has been fantastic with making sure that nobody is going without paying bills. People are making sure we're having food drives and getting everything you need. So right now, that support from our union and a lot of local unions have been donating and being there for us has really been a big help. And it's really boosting the morale on the picket lines, knowing that nobody's going to struggle because all of that support's there.
Yeah, in fact, you guys have got the community's helping as well. You've got a GoFundMe page. We'll get links out on that has exceeded your expectations. Also, safestaffingbuffalo.org has a support the strike page. We'll get links out on social media so folks can help out that way, because community support is the most important in any strike. So to see the kind of support you're getting through your fundraising pages is really, really good to see. But, as you're standing out there on the picket lines, what's the atmosphere like with the general community?
It's really good. We've constantly got people stopping by. We have 2 sites, one that's by the hospital for our picket lines, and we also are picketing in front of the MAC Center in Orchard Park. We've constantly have community members stopping by, just saying they're there for us, beeping, honking. We've had union drivers that are making deliveries to the hospital that refuse to cross the picket line. We've had it was a Pax Air driver, actually, who delivers oxygen. He stopped and said, I'm not crossing that picket line. He honked that horn and drove away. The morale boost to know that, they're there for us. We have people dropping off food, water, walking the line with us that don't even need to. All of that makes a huge difference, and it keeps you going and wanting to get out there another day to keep fighting.
Yeah,
one day longer, one day stronger.
There you go. I would argue that their support for you is the understanding that they know what you mean to the community, that having people like you in there with the kind of caring and passion that you have for doing your job, ultimately at some point down the road, and I bring everything back to radical self-interest, I want people like you taking care of me, other than somebody who's coming from another state for a paycheck. I want somebody who's passionate about the job they're doing and willing to fight for safe staffing levels, so that maybe if it's my turn to be coding, maybe there will be someone to show up.
Absolutely. That's all that matters at the end of the day. It's all about the safety. It's all about being able to, I'm a talker. I could sit in a patient's room for an hour and talk to them and just be there to support them, knowing that sometimes I'm the only person they've got coming in there, and being so short and not being able to even give them 5 minutes of that time. That alone kills me.
Yeah. Especially now during the period that we've just lived through, because again, remember, there was a moment when we were telling you were essential, that you were a hero, that you were doing your patriotic duty, and now to see there's a disconnect for me. Do you feel that?
Yes. And you know what? Yeah, I actually took care of one of the very first COVID patients at Mercy Hospital. Was transferred to a small unit. That first patient, I was sent into that room. I had nothing more than a surgical mask on my face. I didn't even have the proper PPE. It was days later that they started giving me the right stuff. Then my floor that I worked on was shut down and turned completely COVID. We were left to the dogs at that point. We were wearing PPE for 12 hours. We were the only ones that the patients were seeing. Dietaries just delivered trays at the end of the floor. We had to pass them. Lab wasn't coming anymore to draw blood work from them. We had to do it all. Patients were dying. Nobody was there except us. We even donated. There came a time where I actually went and volunteered to even go over to St. Joe's for a while. Left Mercy for about a month. Volunteered at St. Joe's because at that point I felt like that was safer for me because they had all the proper PPE. I feel like we felt like we were doing a duty, and we were so proud that we were giving so much to Catholic Health at that time. We were giving all this extra time. We were picking up extra shifts, doing everything we could to help through the pandemic. And they keep using this against us, saying, how can nurses strike during a pandemic? We fought so hard. And we got gave so much to this hospital. We still can't believe that they won't give us back now. And it has nothing to do with the pandemic, but you would think that they would give us a little bit more for all the sacrifices we made for them too.
I think it has everything to do with the pandemic. The fact that you weren't prepared for it, that you didn't have the safe staffing level, that you didn't get the right training when you needed it, that you didn't have the stuff there. This is a management problem more than anything, because look, you were heroes. You were essential. You showed up and answered the call. And look, you're going to carry those stories of all of the people who came through there for the rest of your life. And that's, I got to tell you, that means something.
It does, I think that's what hurts. It hurts more than anything, and then being cut off from our health insurance now. I don't know, there's not much more they can take away from us, but we're not going to stop fighting. They messed with the wrong group of people. We're Buffalo born and bred. They're not going to they're not taking our pride away from us.
So let me ask you, how can folks help? Ultimately, we want this to end quickly. All of us do. I know you do. I know your coworkers do. I know the community wants it. And it's one person, really. One person could end this tomorrow and save another tens of millions of dollars more over the next couple of weeks by simply going, yeah, we believe we should have safer staffing levels. Look, I've come across it myself. My father-in-law, who passed away years ago, like you said, going to the bathroom. They left him on the toilet for 45 minutes because there was nobody to help him. And ultimately, a member of the family had to go sit with him, for his entire time. That's not how this system should work. So one guy controls all this. What can we do to push him in the direction that needs to happen?
I know there's a board that works with him. They're all in charge of making this decision. We've been putting a little bit of pressure this last week on some of the board members that work, and they're involved in a lot of community businesses. We've been getting information out to Wegmans, and the vice president of Wegmans is on the board, and I know we've been kind of pushing issues with there. All these people are going to help make these decisions and push him to make the right decision. We just need him to say yes to safe staffing. That is it. Once he says yes to the safe staffing and we get our staffing ratios, the strike will be over. That is it. End of story.
End of story. SafeStaffingBuffalo.org, the website. Check that out. Also, we'll get links out to the GoFundMe page and how you can help support Lori and her brothers and sisters there on the picket line. Lori, I appreciate the time. Great talking with you. Keep up the fight one day longer.
Thank you so much.
Good stuff. The best to them. Again, SafeStaffingBuffalo.org. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
Words, blah, 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 without action, without deeds, are absolutely pointless. And our record on deeds so far is not exactly stellar.
Landmark UN climate conference begins in Glasgow, Scotland.
Some of us have to actually live the future that you all are setting on fire.
Big oil CEOs testify on their decades of climate deception. Plus, U.S. Supreme Court case seeks to dismantle EPA's authority to regulate emissions.
All of that deception and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Johnson doesn't seem too optimistic about what world leaders can achieve at COP26, as he told a group of children.
It's going to be very, very tough, this summit. And I'm very worried because it might go wrong.
There's the can-do British spirit. Reminds me of those posters during World War II. Keep calm, Hitler might win.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I know you have been waiting almost 2 years now for the next UN Climate Summit after the one was canceled last year. But before we get there, More news out of Congress?
Indeed. A follow-up on the House Oversight Committee's hearing last week, a landmark hearing in which the CEOs of Exxon, Chevron, BP, and Shell were called to testify about internal documents and other evidence confirming that their companies knew since at least the 1970s that using their products causes catastrophic man-made global warming, and then, instead of warning the public, they spent billions of dollars obstructing climate policy and funding the climate science denial industry to deceive the public.
I'm sure they all confessed and apologized, right?
Nope.
Oh.
The CEOs all denied responsibility, falsely claiming that their company's past statements were in line with the science at the time, which is a lie. They claimed that they are working to reduce their emissions, but not curbing production. And when Democratic Oversight Committee Chair Carolyn Maloney of New York asked them to just affirm that they will no longer spend money to oppose efforts to reduce emissions, either directly or indirectly, none of them would do so.
Go figure.
The kicker, Maloney said that because the oil companies did not comply with the committee's very specific requests for documents, they will be subpoenaed. A first.
Nice. Hope they refuse and are held in criminal contempt.
Meanwhile, at the U.S. Supreme Court, while President Biden is on the world stage trying to convince other governments that the U.S. will enact aggressive climate action, the U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to take up an appeal brought by coal companies and Republican-controlled states seeking to limit the Environmental Protection Agency's authority to regulate carbon emissions from power plants.
Wasn't that settled years ago? Didn't the Supreme Court determine the EPA did have that power to do so?
Yes, but now it's about the mechanism of what the EPA is allowed to do with that authority. And it's not just the EPA's authority that's at stake. The court also agreed to examine Congress's constitutional authority to delegate that power to the EPA to regulate emissions.
You mean the Republicans stolen U.S. Supreme Court?
Yep. According to Slate's court reporter Mark Joseph Stern, that means, quote, the Supreme Court may not only deny the EPA authority to regulate greenhouse gases from power plants, but also prohibit Congress from delegating that authority to the EPA in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, COP26. That's the 2-week United Nations Climate Conference now underway in Glasgow, Scotland.
What does COP stand for?
Conference of Parties. And it's the 26th one. AP put it best, quote, leaders dial up doomsday warnings to kickstart climate talks.
Nice.
This year is focused on hammering out mechanisms for implementing the Paris Climate Agreement to reduce global emissions. Conference host, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, bluntly told U.S. delegates that it's time for the global community to, quote, grow up and deal with the climate crisis, warning of the consequences of the failure to act on this and all future generations. He compared the situation to fictional British spy James Bond, who frequently ends up strapped to a doomsday device,
while a red digital clock ticks down remorselessly to a detonation that will end human life as we know it. And we are in roughly the same position, my fellow global leaders, as James Bond today. Except that the tragedy is, this is not a movie, and the doomsday device is real.
President Joe Biden's warning was equally dire, and he promised action.
This is a challenge of our collective lifetimes, the existential threat to human existence as we know it. And every day we delay, the cost of inaction increases. So let this be the moment that we answer history's call. God bless you all, and may God save the planet. Thank you.
Yeah, God's not going to do it. He's leaving it to you and Boris and James Bond. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I remember when the Catholic Church was about peace and social justice. I remember when the Catholic Church was about the faith. Taking care of, well, the sick, the poor, the downtrodden. Yeah, I kind of remember that. I do. I know it's been a while. But I kind of remember it. I kind of remember those days. I grew up as a kid believing in that stuff. Remember the Sermon on the Mount? We didn't have administrators and priests back then making $2-3 million. $2-3 million. And then they come out and say, well, you know, this was the hand we were dealt. It was the hand we were dealt. Man, I'm struggling with it. I really am. Incredible. And you know, I'm thinking back to, you know, my father-in-law who, you know, was in a hospital that they had high staffing numbers. He was in a step-down ICU and was left on a toilet for 45 minutes after having lung surgery. He had lung cancer and had a lung removed. And I remember just thinking, you know, how crazy is that? I got the hiccups and I just can't stop it. I just remember thinking, how crazy is it that this is allowed to happen here now? It's insane. It's just crazy. Then you look at this story, and you go, man. Again, these religion pimps. Nothing drives me crazier that when you find these people who you know, they're out there just shilling these charlatans, and they seem to all be in Texas or Georgia or Mississippi or one of these Bible states, one of these poorer states that bilk elderly people out of their life savings. Fortunately, this guy, Doc Gallagher, evidently he's gotten 3 life prison terms for bilking listeners out of millions of dollars. 3 life sentences. That's going to be his term for his Ponzi scheme. Also got 30 years for his plea in August of guilty. They will be served concurrently. Look, I don't think he's going to get out of the 3 life sentences. He's not a young guy. But, you know, ultimately it was my thought of going, you know, and I tweeted this out. I hope there's a special place in hell for this guy. I just can't stop this hiccuping. I hope there's a special place so he can spend eternity rotting for what he's done to people. And, you know, some of the stories that came out of this of people, you know, who were saying, look, I'll never trust anybody again. Took all my life savings. And I love the tagline, love the punchline. Gallagher Financial Group. Advertising on Christian radio. Because, you know, God wants you to invest. He says, see you in church on Sunday. Promoted the investment business in books such as Jesus Christ Money Master. And you go, you know, the guy who was flipping over tables in the church and throwing out the money changers? Yeah. this is the guy that they've put out front saying, no, Jesus would want you to invest with us. Just ludicrous. Again, I hope he rots. That is, I think, the best I can come up with. I hope he rots. And I'm hoping he's got company rotting, because there are a bunch of them. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. And I'm hoping by tomorrow the hiccups will be gone. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, big, bold headline today at the Buffalo News. Big, bold headline. Catholic Health spending tens of millions of dollars. Tens of millions to keep Mercy Hospital operating amid strike. They go on and talk to the CEO. Because they're going on strike, and they've brought in this Michigan staffing company. They brought in a scab company to replace the nurses who are on strike. And the CEO said, this Mark Sullivan, he says it's tens of millions of dollars we're spending, but it's to take care of those patients that we need to take care of, because now he cares about the patients. He goes on to say it's what we're doing. We're doing that. It wasn't a choice we made. It was the hand we were dealt. And I got to tell you, my reaction was, no. This was not the hand you were dealt. This is what you chose. Period. End of statement. You chose this path. The honest statement was said, yes, we're spending tens of millions of dollars needlessly, and we did this by choice so that we could keep our workers in place. Because we know that if we're going to bring in scab nurses, it's going to cost multiples of what these workers were asking for. That would have been the honest statement. And here to share some thoughts on, the president and CEO statement of they're wasting tens of millions of dollars that they could have been using to pay the 2,200 nurses and workers at that hospital a living reasonable wage. That's why I've asked Lori Wawrzyniak to come talk with us. She's a float nurse at Mercy Hospital in Buffalo. They've been on strike since October 1st. Lori, thanks for taking time for us.
No problem.
So I'm getting this statement from the president and CEO, who I understand pockets something around $2-3 million a year himself, saying, hey, this is the hand. We were dealt this hand. We've got to spend the tens of millions. When you see that, what do you think?
I mean, it is disgusting. And honestly, ultimately we feel like we deserve a pay raise. But the day we walked out on strike, really, that was the back of our minds. It was really about our patients. It was our staffing. It was our safety. And that is the last thing that's left on the table right now. Everything else has pretty much been figured out. That is the last piece of the puzzle right now, is for him to give us our proper staffing. We need that to be able to take care of these patients safely. That's it. We just need a yes from him. Yeah. It's on the table. Just do it.
Now, this idea that there's no money, I mean, because part of it is, well, we just can't afford to do it. No, you can't afford to do it. You just pissed away tens of millions of dollars that you could have easily at the beginning go, yeah, we do need better staffing lever, because we do care about our patients, and we want to show that we care about our patients, like he's trying to do in this statement.
Right. And like you said, not too far before the strike happened, the announcements of building another hospital in Lockport. There's plenty of money for that. There's rumor that there's been some other buildings surrounding Mercy Hospital that Catholic Health has also purchased. The money's there. The money's there. They just don't want to give it to us.
Now, as I understand, there are 2,200 striking workers today. And look, this is a huge undertaking. So for me, when you see 2,200 people go, it's bad enough that we're going to walk out onto the picket line, stop collecting a paycheck, leave behind the patients that you care for, you love and adore. That it had to be. This has to be a big, to steal a Joe Biden frame, a BFD.
It is. It is. It was the hardest decision we all had to make. I mean, our whole lives are built around taking care of people. And it got to the point where it was impossible to do that. We were not able to take care of the patients we needed to anymore. It's killing us. We cannot wait to get back in that building and do what we do best. And like I said, it's the ball is in Catholic Health's court right now. The union and the morale is still there on the picket lines. We're going to keep fighting until we get what we need. No matter what he says about people wanting to come back into the building, I haven't heard one person say that they're going to give up yet and come in there until we get what we need. We need that safe staffing. We need all the things that we need. Catholic Health has what we need. They just have to say yes to it, and the strike can be over.
Yeah. Or it never had to happen. This is the part that gets me. It never had to happen because, the claim that, well, we just can't afford it. Well, evidently you can afford to piss away $10 million in a month, little over a month, where, had you said, yeah, we'll figure this out and we'll not have the disruption, instead of pointing back at you guys saying, well, this was the hand we dealt. Look what they did to us. No, you did this to yourself, Mr. President.
They're giving these nurses $150, $160 an hour, like triple what we were getting paid in that hospital. And even the staffing ratios, from what we heard, each nurse in there right now has one aide working with them, and they have 2 patients to take care of. 2 patients to take care of with an aide for $160 an hour. We were running a quarter of that for an hourly rate, and we were taking care of 8, 9 patients with no aide.
See, this is where I go back to the table. I got to be honest with you, Lori. I know you said all the other stuff has been settled. It's just the staffing part that's left. I got to tell you, I got to go back to the table and go, look what you're willing to pay for our services. You've now shown us what we are worth. We'll take that, please.
Exactly. It's it's mind-boggling. You don't. And like I said, yes, all those things matter to us, and it makes us sick. It makes us sick to see how they've been given so much to these people who aren't their core staff. We're the community. Most of the people that work in that hospital are born and raised around South Buffalo. We're taking care of people who are our friends and family and neighbors. We love these people. We've given our blood, sweat, and tears, and they can't even give us anything in return. And they're willing to give people from out of state who've got no connection to the community or the people quadruple what they were going to give us. It's amazing.
It is crazy. Now, again, you were talking about staffing levels, and you said that, the numbers are mind-blowing. You're like 2 patients per nurse, which is, I think, wow, if you could get that.